Trump tariffs ignite U.S. trade war.
China and Europe strike back at America.
Factories warn of mass layoffs across U.S.
Global trade system on the brink of collapse.
Trump's tariffs have lit the fuse, and America is now staring down a full-blown trade war. China and Europe are already striking back, blocking billions in U.S. exports, filing WTO complaints, and threatening tariffs that could crush American industry. Inside U.S. factories, managers whisper about layoffs. On farms, debt is already at record highs, and another blow could wipe out entire livelihoods. This isn't just about trade deals in Washington. This is your grocery bill climbing. This is your car payment doubling. This is your job suddenly hanging by a thread. And the retaliation, it's only just beginning, with consequences no one in America is ready for. It began with a promise. Donald Trump told Americans his tariffs would protect U.S. workers. He said foreign countries were cheating America, stealing jobs, and dumping cheap goods into U.S. markets. Tariffs, he argued, would level the playing field. But what started as protection has ignited confrontation, and the numbers make the stakes crystal clear. Trump's new measures include a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum, new duties on semiconductors, green tech, and machinery. On paper, these sound like tough bargaining chips, but in reality, they're landmines in a global economy already on edge. Why? Because the U.S. isn't fighting small players. It's up against the European Union, America's largest trading partner at over $900 billion annually, and China with a $690 billion trade relationship. When Washington strikes, they strike back hard. Within days of Trump's announcement, Beijing filed a formal complaint with the WTO. The language was blunt. Washington was accused of undermining the global trading system. At the same time, China began preparing its counterstrike. Early leaks pointed to new tariffs on U.S. agricultural products, aircraft, and technology components.
Europe wasn't far behind. The EU launched investigations into U.S. subsidies, hinting at retaliatory tariffs on American industrial goods. Officials in Brussels framed it as simple math. If the U.S. blocks our exports, we will block theirs. And for America's biggest industries, that's a nightmare. Consider U.S. farmers. They're already sitting on a mountain of debt, over $562 billion, the highest in history. China is their single largest buyer of soybeans, once purchasing $14 billion worth in 2017. But when Trump launched his first trade war, Beijing canceled contracts overnight. U.S. soybean exports to China collapsed by more than 70% in just 1 year. Now history is repeating. Farmers are terrified that another round of tariffs will cut off markets they never fully regained. Farm bankruptcies, which spiked during the last trade war, could surge again. And this time, the safety nets are thinner. Imagine this: a farmer in Iowa watching cargo ships turn around empty because China won't buy. Prices drop, debt rises, and another family farm disappears. Now look at America's factories. The U.S. auto industry alone employs nearly 8 million Americans across assembly lines, dealerships, and suppliers. But auto companies rely on both cheap imported parts and access to foreign markets. Back in 2018, General Motors warned that Trump's steel tariffs added over $1 billion in extra costs. Ford said similar measures had wiped out profits. Now, with a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs and Europe threatening retaliation, automakers face a brutal choice: eat the costs, pass them to consumers, or slash jobs. None of those options end well for ordinary Americans. Cars could become thousands of dollars more expensive. Production could shift overseas to bypass tariffs, and workers on U.S. soil, the very people Trump vowed to protect, could be the first to go. And that's only the beginning.
Tariffs don't just punish foreign companies, they punish you. Economists have long warned that tariffs act as a hidden tax. In Trump's first term, studies estimated the average U.S. household paid about $1,000 more per year in higher costs because of tariffs. Now, with new duties targeting everything from electronics to construction materials, that figure could climb even higher. Your groceries, your rent, your utility bills, all quietly inflated by trade battles happening thousands of miles away. And remember, this is unfolding in an economy where inflation already stings. Gas prices swing wildly, housing is unaffordable, debt is piling up. Add a tariff war on top, and the ordinary American consumer becomes collateral damage. Here's the question no one in Washington wants to ask. Is America isolating itself? When Trump targets China and Europe at the same time, he's not just picking fights, he's pushing allies together. The EU and China rarely align, but against Washington's tariffs, they suddenly share a common enemy. And that should scare US policymakers, because a united front of Europe and China could carve America out of critical markets, redirect supply chains, and leave US companies stranded. Imagine an economic map where America isn't the hub, but the outsider. So here's where we stand. Trump's tariffs hit with force. China and Europe retaliate immediately. Farmers and factories brace for impact. Consumers face higher bills. America risks becoming isolated in global trade. And yet, this is only the opening act, because retaliation is never the end. It's the beginning of escalation. And let's move deeper into the hidden cracks this trade war is opening, the global alliance is shifting under America's feet, and the terrifying scenarios that could follow if this fight spirals out of control.
Retaliation never ends where it starts. It always escalates. China has already tested its opening shot, filing WTO complaints and hinting at tariffs on US agriculture and tech. But here's the darker possibility. Beijing goes further, much further. China holds nearly $770 billion in US Treasury securities. That means America's largest foreign rival is also one of its biggest lenders. If Beijing even hints at reducing purchases, US borrowing costs spike. Interest rates climb. Mortgages, credit cards, small business loans, everything tied to debt gets more expensive. Imagine tariffs hitting your grocery bill, while higher interest rates crush your mortgage at the same time. That's not just pressure, that's economic suffocation. And Beijing knows this, which is why tariffs may just be the first weapon in a much larger arsenal. Then there's Europe. Washington likes to frame Brussels as an ally, but the EU has its own survival to think about. Trade with the US is massive, yes, but Europe's industries also depend on China. So what happens if Brussels is forced to choose? Recent moves suggest they already are. The EU is investigating US subsidies on electric vehicles, a direct counter to Trump's tariffs. Retaliatory duties on US industrial goods are on the table. And behind closed doors, European leaders warn that America is becoming unreliable. Think about that. NATO allies quietly wondering if Washington has become a liability. This isn't just economics anymore. It's geopolitics, and fractured alliances always carry a cost. Let's return to America's factories. If Europe and China impose retaliatory tariffs, US exports face a wall. Industrial goods, machinery, tech components, the very backbone of American manufacturing, suddenly priced out of foreign markets. What do companies do when they can't sell abroad and costs at home are rising? They cut jobs, they automate, or they move production overseas.
Ford already moved some operations to Mexico in past years to dodge tariffs. Apple shifted supply chains into Vietnam and India when tensions with China grew. Multiply those decisions across industries, and the very jobs Trump claims to protect start vanishing. Not slowly, not quietly, but in waves. Here's where the everyday American feels the blow. Tariffs ripple into higher costs. Retaliation limits exports. Companies pass the losses on to consumers, and suddenly, the average US household isn't paying $1,000 more per year like in the last tariff war. They're paying even more. Consider autos. A mid-range vehicle could rise by $3,000 to $5,000 once tariffs and retaliatory costs settle. Electronics, pricier. Food, already climbing, pushed higher by farm retaliation. Utilities, vulnerable if energy trade routes shift. It becomes a spiral. Prices rise, consumers cut spending, companies sell less, layoffs grow, and the economy slows. Not from one massive collapse, but from 1,000 small cuts. But the most dangerous domino is the dollar. America's power in the global system rests on one fragile foundation: the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. If Europe and China escalate trade wars while BRICS nations push alternatives, pressure on the dollar grows. And once faith in the dollar weakens, everything changes. Imports cost more, exports lose competitiveness, inflation surges, and America's unique ability to print debt to finance wars, bailouts, and crises shrinks overnight. Tariffs may look like economic weapons, but the dollar is the battlefield that matters most. Here's the contradiction at the heart of Trump's policy. Tariffs are meant to shield U.S. jobs, but history shows they often do the opposite. Farmers lose markets, factories face higher costs, consumers pay more, and the long-term damage outweighs any short-term protection.
Yet politically, tariffs are powerful. They send a message, they look tough, they feed into the narrative of America standing up to rivals. But the price tag is real, and it lands on ordinary Americans first. So the contradiction deepens. Is protectionism saving the American worker or slowly strangling them? Scenarios ahead. 3 possible futures now stand out. Escalation spiral. Retaliation continues. Tariffs expand, and alliances fracture. Inflation spikes, jobs vanish, and a recession deepens into a crisis. Fragile deal. Trump strikes a shaky compromise, but trust is broken. Europe and China quietly build alternatives, and U.S. influence erodes. World isolation. America doubles down, but the world adjusts without it. Supply chains rewire, the dollar weakens, and U.S. consumers discover that protectionism has left them more exposed than ever before. None of these outcomes point to strength, all point to vulnerability. So here we are. Trump's tariffs were supposed to protect. Instead, they've lit the fuse of a trade war threatening every corner of the U.S. economy. Farmers, factories, consumers, all caught in the crossfire. And as China and Europe escalate, America faces a deeper question, not just about tariffs or trade, but about its place in the world. Can the U.S. afford to keep fighting everyone at once, or will the strategy meant to make America strong again leave it more isolated, more fragile, and more exposed than at any point in modern history? The escalation has only just begun, and the world is watching to see how or if America survives it.